Welcome, champions. This is Arcadia. Hey, champions. Today, I wanted to take a step back and discuss my writing process of how I went about making the script for Arcadia First Omen. My writing process is not the traditional way. I am, I guess you could say, an architect slash gardener. I wasn't trained in this writing style. I just did what was most comfortable with me from how I made my old scripts, which I've talked about in the past. But one of my strongest aspects of myself is I work really well, not by myself, but with a team. I had to make a team. And that's where I got Sean and Doug and Dylan involved to make the script earlier on, in 2020, roughly. But I knew that I needed some type of structure. I guess I'm an architect where I did do an outline of the whole script. And then from there, I decided to figure out what exactly was the arcs I wanted to hit on. I had a lot of different stories that I wanted to tell, and it came down to I want to focus on a guild, I want to focus on the game, and I want to focus on the company. That was like our biggest takeaway when we were making the script early on. With the game, it was very inspired by Game of Thrones. I wanted that darker feel, the royal houses and what are their conflicts, that these houses have with trying to maintain the lands. With the company, it was a lot harder for me to understand that side. I feel like Doug helped me out to incorporate what was realistic about a company making a game and their problems, especially when new technology is being given to them and they're trying to satisfy the audience, the people who play this game. And it was important for the company to meet all those expectations. For the guild, I feel like the biggest thing that I put into it was how I really dealt with my guild in Final Fantasy 14. 14 was a massive inspiration to making the story. And, what were my positives and what were my negatives about my guild? My guild was called Dawn of Arcadia. Arcadia was a region in Final Fantasy Final Fantasy 12 that they did kind of talk a little bit about in 14. But I was always a fan of the judges in 12, and they guarded the land of Arcadia. So that's where I got that name, and it just stuck with me for a long time. I remember one of the guild members, when they played 12, thought that our guild was the enemy, which I guess you could say it was, but, at the end of the day, it is knights trying to guard Arcadia, and you could be good or bad. When I wrote these characters, a lot of the characters in our show are based off of actual guild members, and I try to put myself in their shoes when I dived into each of these characters. And I also put a lot of myself into each of these characters. How would I react to certain situations? And I thought it was important for me to connect with each of these characters, whether you're big or you're small. That was a big benefit and struggle. I did when I was making the script early on, and I really wanted to honor my guild members. One thing that Doug wanted me to bring up was one of the biggest inspirations to the climax that I was trying to get in the early on stages of the story was I got into a fight with the guild members. I was part of the leadership, and I took that job seriously. Kind of like start allowing yourself to make this a job if you're not careful, and I sure did. I cared about everyone who was part of the guild, and I wanted to make sure everyone was happy. And there would be situations where you couldn't always do that. As the game continued and the guild kept growing or not growing, I remember I felt like at one point I was one of the only ones who was trying to make sure that everyone was happy in the guild. It was important that Arcadia didn't fall apart. And I felt like at one point of my journey in the guild it winded up almost falling apart. and I took measures into making sure it didn't fall apart, which kind of backfired in my face. It's a little tricky just because of the situation, and we used Discord to resolve some of these issues. But at the end of the day, that situation really put a sour outlook on how I looked at Final Fantasy 14 / MMOs. I almost quit 14 because of this incident. But I winded up using that pain and incorporated that into our story. That a fight with guild members is not usually one-sided. There is always two sides to things, and I feel like that was important for me to showcase both sides of the argument. But maybe I'll go into the details of that situation later. But at the end of the day, I tried to incorporate as much of myself into the story to give the story heart. And I wanted some of my other writers like Doug and Dylan and Sean to incorporate a lot of themselves into the story so we could hopefully connect with the audience and tell something very, very special. I think at the end of the day, when you look at our 10 episodes, we did accomplish that. These are very real characters with extraordinary situation as they get ready for this new expansion that is called Omen Soul. Soul is the expansion of the new game that's coming out. But they're all getting ready for this, and there is a big thing about to happen that's going to change their lives forever. If you enjoyed this content, please drop a like. If you have any questions, please make a comment below. And if you like this video, please subscribe. And Arcadians, be ever vigilant.